I want to start off today by asking you, the listener, a massive, almost unimaginably large hypothetical question.
Oh, I love these.
Right. So imagine you were handed a completely blank slate, like a magic wand, to redesign human civilization from absolute scratch.
Okay.
What structures would you fight to keep? And, maybe more importantly, what would you throw straight in the trash?
I mean, that is the ultimate thought experiment because we all have our minor grievances with society.
Yeah, taxes, traffic.
Exactly, bureaucracy. But looking at the entire global architecture and just deciding to tear it all down to the studs, that requires a completely different level of thinking.
And that level of thinking is our exact mission for today's deep dive.
Mm.
We're looking at this striking, highly radical manifesto from March 2, 2024.
Yeah.
It's written by an author named Shui Feng, and the text is titled The Future of Humanity, Shui-Feng-Style Communism.
Quite a title.
It really is. So our goal today is to unpack this blueprint. And when I say blueprint, I mean a highly detailed architectural plan for a fundamentally unrecognizable human society, one that the author calls Lifechanyuan.
And we should clarify, it is a text that does not ask for, minor legislative reforms.
No, not at all.
It demands a total rewrite of the human operating system from the ground up.
Exactly. But before we jump into the mechanics of how this works, we really need to set some parameters for our conversation today.
Definitely.
Because this text deals with some highly politically charged concepts. I mean, we're talking about communism, the total abolition of global nations, and basically dismantling every modern societal structure you know.
Yeah, the big stuff.
Right. So our job today isn't to play judge and jury. We are not taking sides, and we're absolutely not endorsing these viewpoints.
Right,
We're acting as your tour guides. We're going to explore and impartially report on the ideas presented in the text. We just want to treat this as a pure intellectual exercise so you can see the world through this specific, very radical lens.
Setting that boundary is so crucial because what makes this specific text so fascinating to analyze isn't just the sheer, staggering scale of the teardown.
Yeah.
It's the fact that Zhu Feng claims this is not just armchair philosophy.
This is the crazy part.
Right. He points to an ongoing 15-year real-world experiment to actually back up these claims.
That is the part that completely hooked me.
Yeah.
But to understand this radical future, this Lifechanyuan, we have to start with the author's grim diagnosis of our past and present. Why does he think we need the blank slate in the first place?
Well, the diagnosis in the text is sweeping. I mean, Zhu Feng looks back over the last 5,000 years of human history.
Okay.
And he points out that regardless of geography, whether you look at Europe, Africa, Asia, the Americas, Oceania, the historical loop is identical.
It's just a cycle.
Yeah, the timeline is essentially a continuous, unbroken cycle of war, hunger, disease, turmoil, and natural disasters.
So it's basically a loop of misery that just resets and repeats no matter what century you happen to be born into.
Exactly. And from that observation, the author makes a really definitive claim. He says that in all of recorded history, no nation and no individual has ever lived a life of true freedom, joy, and bliss.
Wow.
Yeah, the text argues that the absolute baseline of the human experience is suffering.
He doesn't just, vaguely gesture at society being the problem, though. He gets specific.
Very specific.
He points the finger at 5 pillars of our current world.
Yeah.
And this is where the teardown really begins. The text identifies nations, religions, political parties, money, and power as the root causes.
The big 5.
Right. But let's look at the mechanics of that. Why those 5? What is the common denominator that makes him think those institutions cause suffering rather than solve it?
Well, think about what all 5 of those things do at their core. They create boundaries and leverage.
Okay.
Nations draw physical lines, right? They create these us versus them dynamics. Religions draw ideological lines. Political parties foster constant internal friction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then money creates a mechanism for hoarding resources, and power is just the tool used to enforce all of those artificial divisions. So Wifeng's logic is that these institutions are essentially engines of conflict.
Right.
Therefore, the only logical solution is to eradicate all 5 of them entirely.
Let me put that into a structural perspective. It's like looking at a malfunctioning smartphone. The author isn't suggesting we download a software patch. He's arguing that the battery, the screen, and the motherboard itself are totally toxic and need to be thrown in the incinerator.
That's a great way to put it.
But if we literally delete all of those structures, no countries, no money, no organized religion, no central power, My immediate fear, and I assume the fear of anyone listening, is that we plunge straight back into the Stone Age.
Oh, absolutely.
So how does he justify removing all the guardrails without the car just flying off the cliff?
That is the very first major counter-argument the text has to tackle. Because, yeah, if you remove the referee, doesn't the game just devolve into a huge brawl? But Sweffing's rebuttal to this fear of regression is actually really interesting. He argues that humanity's overall cognitive level has simply risen too high to go backward.
Meaning what exactly? We're just too smart to become cavemen again.
Essentially, yeah. He says our technology has advanced, our thinking has become more dynamic, and our collective wisdom has reached unprecedented levels. Basically, the cognitive genie is out of the bottle.
Okay, I can see that.
But the evidence he uses to prove that we refuse to go backward is deeply unconventional.
Oh, this part was wild.
Right. To show that people are actively shedding old structures, Shuang points to a modern societal trend. He points out the increasing reluctance of individuals to enter into what he calls marital and familial hardships.
I found that leap so surprising when reading through the sources. Like, he looks at declining marriage rates and the breakdown of the traditional family unit, and instead of seeing societal decay like most critics, he sees
An evolutionary upgrade.
an upgrade. Yeah.
He literally sees it as proof that humanity is actively rejecting restrictive small-scale ownership. In his view, the traditional family unit is just another form of a boundary.
Like a mini nation.
Exactly, it's a micronation. So people avoiding marriage is evidence of a collective consciousness preparing for a broader, totally borderless existence.
Okay, so if we aren't going backward to tribalism, and we are aggressively throwing away nations, money, and now even marriage and families, what is the actual destination? Like, what replaces all of this?
Well, the destination is the Lifechanyuan era. It's also referred to as Shuofeng-style communism, or the kingdom of the greatest creator.
Walk me through the architecture of this kingdom, because from what I read, it sounds incredibly empty.
Empty is a good word for it. It is defined by a complete void of traditional rules. In this era, there are no nations and no money. There are absolutely no marriages and no families.
Which we covered, yeah.
But it goes so much further. There are no constitutions, no laws, and no regulations whatsoever.
A global society with zero laws, no family units, and no private money. I have to push back on this on behalf of the listeners.
Please do.
How do millions of people interact without a single law? Like, if someone takes my food and there are no police, no courts, no property rights, that isn't a utopia.
Yeah.
That is a chaotic, multiplayer survival game with no referees. How does the author mathematically balance a world where everyone can theoretically just take what they want?
It definitely sounds like a recipe for absolute anarchy to anyone raised inside a modern legal system.
Okay.
But the text clarifies an alternative architecture.
Okay, what is it?
Instead of external laws, where a police officer threatens you with jail if you steal, individuals in the Lifechanyuan era adhere entirely to a set of internal values.
So it's just a global honor system.
It's deeper than just an honor system. It's a fundamental shift in how resources are even perceived. In this state, resources are shared worldwide.
Right.
The text describes this paradox where everyone, quote, possesses nothing yet owns everything. By being entirely selfless, these individuals supposedly create what Suifeng calls the most magnificent symphony of life.
So you don't steal food
Because
because
you already have access to all the food, and you don't hoard because there is no self to hoard for.
it possesses nothing yet owns everything. I mean, it paints a beautiful poetic picture. But listening to this, it is very easy to just wave it off as a sci-fi utopian fantasy.
Oh, totally.
It feels very ungrounded. And the author anticipates that skepticism, doesn't he?
He does. The text directly addresses the reader who might be sitting there thinking, well, this is impossible. And Suofeng's response leans heavily into a deeply philosophical foundation. He says, all material phenomena are the outcomes of consciousness.
So the formless world, like our minds, our thoughts,
Yeah.
actually creates the physical reality we inhabit.
Precisely. If you change the internal consciousness, the physical reality of a world without money or laws just naturally manifests. And because of this philosophical principle, Shuofeng insists this isn't just a fantasy utopian theory. He points to a practical, real-world application called the second home.
Yes, the 15-year experiment.
Right. This new model of human production and life actually started in April 2009. And according to the text, it has been running successfully for 15 years with, textual, visual, and video evidence all available online.
Let's stop right there, because this is where the theoretical hits the pavement.
Yeah.
You read about the global eradication of money and nations, and you just assume it's an abstract thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
But then the author pivots and says, hey, we've actually been running a 15-year beta test of this exact lifestyle.
It's a huge pivot.
Paint me a picture of the mechanics here. If I live in the second home, how do I actually get my breakfast if there's no money? Like, who takes out the communal trash if there are no laws or managers to assign chores?
So we have to look at how Shui Feng's principles operate in practice. Because there are no individual families, there is no private hoarding of groceries or separate kitchens.
Okay, so it's all communal.
Exactly. Resources are pooled, so you eat in a communal setting. And because individuals operate on those internal values rather than external laws, labor isn't coerced by a paycheck or, like, a threat of eviction.
Wow.
Work, whether that's cooking breakfast or taking out the trash, is given freely out of a desire to maintain that symphony of life. Conflicts aren't settled by an HR department or a judge. They are supposedly dissolved because the friction of personal ownership has just been removed.
That brings up a massive chicken or egg question for me.
Let's hear it.
According to Shui Feng's own framework, all material phenomena are the outcomes of consciousness.
Right.
So does changing your consciousness internally create the reality of the second home? Or do you need to be placed into the physical environment of the second home to force that change in your consciousness?
That is a phenomenal question, and it really strikes at the core tension of the manifesto. According to the logic of the text, it requires an intentional feedback loop.
A feedback loop.
Yeah, you cannot just drop average modern people into a lawless, moneyless commune and expect harmony. You would get the exact chaos you described earlier.
Right, the survival game.
Exactly. You have to start with a seed group whose consciousness has already begun to shift. They build the physical environment of the second home. Then, that environment acts as a greenhouse, nurturing and accelerating the consciousness of anyone else who enters it.
Okay, but if that greenhouse model is so successful and has been running since 2009, why hasn't it scaled to the whole planet yet? If it truly is the perfect symphony of life, why aren't we all living in it right now?
Because there is one monumental roadblock standing in the way.
Of course there is.
The text reveals that for humanity to scale this lifestyle globally, we require a profound spiritual purification. Sheffing calls this building a human soul garden.
A human soul garden. What does building that actually entail, mechanically speaking?
The primary task is agricultural in nature, I guess you could say. It's uprooting weeds from the human heart. The text provides a very explicit list of negative and pessimistic psychological elements that just must be eradicated. To enter this era, humanity has to uproot greed, jealousy, comparison, selfishness.
It's a lot of weeds.
And there's more. Laziness, complaints, hatred, and ego. All of it has to go.
Let's rethink that gardening metaphor for a second, because trying to be a little less greedy or trying not to complain when you're stuck in traffic that is pulling weeds, that's pruning the leaves.
Right.
But pulling out ego, comparison, and selfishness entirely, that feels like genetically modifying the plant.
It's a total overhaul.
Yeah, evolutionary biology is built on competition and comparison. These aren't just bad habits we picked up. They are the foundational survival instincts of human nature. Can humanity actually be purified to this extent without losing the very engine that makes us human?
See, you're looking at traits like ego and comparison as essential survival mechanisms, the very tools that got humanity through the last 5,000 years.
Right, they kept us alive.
Right, but Zhu Feng is looking at those exact same traits as the virus. To him, they aren't survival tools. They are the direct cause of the war, hunger, and disease of the last 5,000 years.
So the very things that kept us alive are actually the things keeping us miserable.
In his framework, absolutely yes. To build the soul garden, the ego must be entirely uprooted. But what's truly striking is how the text concludes. I'll synthesize his final stance here.
Go for it.
Shifeng does not seem overly concerned with whether you or I find the psychological surgery too difficult, or even if we want to undergo it at all.
Wait, really? It's not an opt-in system?
No. The text concludes with this uncompromising, absolute assertion. Shifeng writes that despite people's beliefs or their willingness, quote, the program has already been initiated.
The program has already been initiated.
Yeah.
That is a haunting way to end a manifesto. It's a definitive drop-the-mic moment.
It really shifts the entire tone from a hopeful proposal to an inevitability. He's not asking for the world's permission to change. He's stating that the gears are already turning, the global consciousness is already shifting, and the future of humanity simply is Shufeng-style communism.
Wow. Let's take a breath and just recap the staggering scope of the journey we've taken through these sources today.
It's been a lot.
It has. We started with a diagnosis that all of recorded history is a relentless cycle of suffering caused by 5 specific pillars:
Mhm.
nations, religions, politics, money, and power.
Then we explored the radical antidote, right? Tearing all 5 of those pillars down, along with laws and the traditional family unit, trusting that our advanced cognition will somehow prevent us from backsliding into tribalism.
Right. And from there, we looked at how this theory is supposedly grounded in a 15-year real-world experiment, the second home, which is driven by the philosophy that a shift in consciousness actually creates physical reality, allowing people to live without money or rule.
Yeah, the greenhouse effect.
Exactly. And finally, we hit the monumental catch. None of this global utopia happens without the total spiritual purification of the human ego.
It is a comprehensively radical worldview. I mean, it leaves absolutely no stone unturned in its critique of modern life, and it demands absolute internal transformation as the price of admission to its future.
I want to thank you, the listener, for taking this intellectual deep dive with us today. It is incredibly valuable to step outside of our normal frameworks and examine these outside-the-box blueprints for the future.
It really is.
Even just as an exercise in understanding diverse perspectives, encountering a text that wants to abolish literally everything you know forces you to clarify what you actually value about the way we live now.
Yeah, because when you are forced to mentally defend the existence of laws or money or your own ego against a philosophy that wants to erase them, you end up understanding the mechanics of your own life much more deeply.
Beautifully said. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to ponder on your own. It builds on everything we've just discussed, but looks at the ultimate consequence of this human soul garden.
I'm curious.
Let's imagine, hypothetically, that we actually succeeded. Let's say humanity managed to permanently uproot all comparison, all jealousy, and our entire ego. What happens to human ambition?
Oh, wow.
Does a society completely devoid of internal friction and individual desire still create breathtaking art? Does it still invent radical new technologies or build rockets to reach for the stars? Or does the symphony of life actually require a few discordant, selfish notes just to keep the music playing?
That is a fascinating question.
Something to think about. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.